Hello and welcome. This is our Talk to Addis program. I am your host, Abdullah Brahani. Today, I just have brought you an honorable guest to our program. Our guest is Dr. Abubakar Campo, UNICEF representative to Ethiopia. He is by profession a medical surgeon. Lives there with us. What measures is UNICEF taking to protect children in Ethiopia, from violence, exploitation, and abuse? What measures currently is UNICEF taking? And I think you might just have a track record of children activities in Ethiopia. So what measures do you have?
Sure. I think there are a number of measures which we're putting in place. I think one of the things from an early stage is really making sure that every child gets identified from birth. There's still quite a large number of children which have not yet a birth certificate. And this is something which we're trying to correct with the different government institutions to be facilitated. There's still a lot of work to be done in this particular case, but giving everyone an identity is the first step for protection. And there's still a very long way for us to go, but our child protection teams is working towards that. We have community dialogues within communities because, there are norms and cultures which are also linked to it, and these are not easy to change. For that, you will have to live within the communities and understand those communities as well. And this can only be done by the community dialogue. So having, talks with communities, with the elders, your network of religious leaders can contribute. So we are working closely with them, traditional leaders as well. If you want to reduce harmful practices, for example, like female genital mutilations, or even early child marriage, for example, which are really harmful practices. There are certain which are linked to a power dynamic or a financial dynamic. We know and we have seen it immediately. When you have a drought, for example, child marriage increases, in particular for girls, because it is almost like a coping mechanism for families, because they feel she would be more protected if she gets into a richer household who can basically provide for her. Now, is it good or is it bad? We can debate it from different perspectives, but it is what it is. So again, poverty reductions, it would be a good element to reduce some of those harmful practices. Some has nothing to do with poverty. It's just not knowing. It's just cultural. So we have to work on those ones, and we have to identify, those stakeholders who can move those norms and cultures within the community, which might not necessarily be UNICEF. This might be work which needs to be done by traditional leaders, by religious leaders who are quite influential within their own communities. So this is also why it's very important for UNICEF to understand, what the cultures and the tradition is, where they're coming from, and how they can be bent, amended, or shifted in one or the other way. So this is not work which can be done very, very, very easily. We do have one-stop centers, for example, in particular for where in the past, when a woman in particular, but also sometimes a male, could be victims of act of violence just because of their gender, could be also sexually, where they come to the hospital, then they have to walk to the police, and then they have to go to so many institutions. So we created a center where everything is at the same time, so that they don't have to walk and be exposed to different institutions, which is good. But even those ones which we have created, I must say, we like to talk about it very proudly of it, but they're not enough. There is no woman who gets victim who will be walking 50 kilometers to get to a one-stop center. So more still needs to be done. And we need to have, for example, also much more, a bigger number of social workers. In a country like Ethiopia, you should be having at least 2 million, at least as a minimum, 2 million social workers. You have less than even, 10,000. So which for those kind of issues, But I think at the same time, because of all those constraints which we have, we need to make sure that the community participates in the solution of this problem. So it's about educating, communities and children from the beginning. We should be making sure that already in schools, violence is taken off the agenda, and not promoted in the agenda. So when you grow up and become an adult, you don't think necessarily that you need to solve your problems violently. So it's not just work which can be done by one. It's a whole society who needs to be contributing to really end it. Violence is not something which only exists in Ethiopia. I mean, we have violence quite high even in high-income countries. It's a different level, it's a different origin, but it is there, including domestic violence to a large scale. So I think the solutions, for overcoming, and protecting children more is to promote, the sense of tolerance, the sense of understanding, the sense of not necessarily accusing, and really more of coming together than trying to create divisions among us. And that's really something which not just UNICEF can. It needs to be everyone in the society who needs to be contributing to that.
Okay, can we talk about some specific programs which you might have that aim at child protection?
Yes, I mean, as I said, we have birth registration, which is a specific program. Gender-based violence, which is, we have the one-stop centers, which are there as well. Our child protection people are also quite involved in IDPs and refugee camps, where we give a safe space. So we create recreational centers, which we have basically in place, which are doing exactly what I have said before. But it's like a drop in the ocean.
I see.
Because everybody needs to be contributing to that.
Yeah. Let's come to how does UNICEF respond to humanitarian emergencies in Ethiopia, like natural or conflicts. For example, recently you might have heard, I don't know, in Gamogofa, there was landslide.
Yes.
So there were different parts of society, so compartment society, who have been affected, victims of that kind of landslide. So I think as United Nations International Fund, you might have a stake, you might say something in this regard.
Sure. Yeah. But everything what I've told you is part of the humanitarian context. But just to go
when this kind of something happens,
yes.
What emergency interference or measures do you take? If you
I mean, we have pre-positioned emergency stock, like drugs. So we have health emergency stocks. We have water and sanitation emergency stocks. We have nutrition stocks. So, for example, we have ensured that all malnourished cases, severe malnourished cases, we have sufficient nutrition stocks available. As I also told you, we need to find local solutions for that. So those ones are imported, but they are available. We sent 2 trucks of relief supplies to Gofa to respond to this. Mainly in those situations when we have flooding, landslides, droughts. I mean, for UNICEF, the critical elements is water, it's medication, health, shelters, and something what we can note food items, which is cooking pots, blankets, essential needs which people which are displaced, which we are providing. So we have sent trucks. When it's cholera, we providing cholera kits, cholera treatment beds, chlorine, disinfectants, and medicines to those areas where we have cholera outbreaks. When it comes to vaccine, preventable diseases, when we have outbreaks like measles and so forth, we are working together with Gavi and WHO to bring in the vaccines, and then we do the vaccinations in those areas. Malaria, for example, is something where, in malaria we have a vaccine which is available right now. The problem with the vaccines, it's not yet, it's the efficiency of the vaccines is still debatable. It's not as good as normally what we have vaccines. So it's only 50 to 60% of those who are vaccinated are basically protected. But this is better than nothing. That's what I'm saying. So in high prevalence areas where we have malaria, for example, we are supporting the government of doing the immunization, bed nets distributions with them, and malaria treatment, which are, so for example, there are many new areas in the Oromia regions which have been open to us right now. So these are areas where we were not before, which are open. And there's a lot of support which is needed. Now, you may think that this is not humanitarian, but in an area where the facilities are not functional and so on and so forth, when we bring in those commodities, we are considering this as humanitarian. So we have pre-positioned, so in every our field office, I mean not all field office, but in the main field offices where we have done the analysis, where we know that flooding will be coming on a yearly basis and so on and so forth, where we know where we have outbreak, we pre-position very closely there so that we can respond immediately with the different commodities which allows us to do so. We also supply human resources there as well, so because it's not just the medication, but we work as well where there needs to be an influx of workers, whatever the field is, we also do that as well. So our humanitarian response, in fact, is even bigger than our development response right now. But again, I want to emphasize, if we think about flooding, the solution is not to do humanitarian response. The solution is to prevent next year the flooding, because we are flooding every year in the same areas. So we need to have more flood dams so that they control the floods and bring the flood water down into the groundwater as well. Or we create artificial lakes. But this needs bigger investment than what we have as UNICEF. If you think about droughts, we need to either pipe or create more water points in those particular areas, But also we need to think about, and I think this is to the credit of His Excellency the Prime Minister, of replanting trees, But we are deforesting right now rather than foresting. And yet, for example, in Ethiopia, the most consumable cooking energy which we have is still firewood. So it needs to be reduced. So it is good to do humanitarian response, but we can prevent some of these things. And I think we need to start looking towards this direction. But for all of this, again, as I said, you need stability and you need peace. In conflict, you cannot do this kind of things. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation, but I think we need to be promoting much more stability so that we can do all those kind of things which will be leading to much more prosperous societies. And I think, with all the things which we're discussing with government, because we're here in support of government, we hope that, that stability and peace will prevail so that we can go faster to our objectives which we have.
Yeah, maybe just you pick it up a point, you were saying the Green Legacy initiative that the Prime Minister is running. How do you see its impact in minimizing or just, sustaining a climate, crisis in the world at which the world is suffering from right now? So how do you see its contribution?
Well, I think the contributions of planting a number of trees, of making Ethiopia much greener, it's to all the credits to the leadership of Ethiopia. It is the right thing to do. But the other countries needs to be doing it as well. It cannot be just Ethiopia, in a certain way. But I think, we cannot speak to all of them. At least Ethiopia has taken the responsibilities of contributing to it. It will be positive.
Let's come to what are the future plans and priorities for UNICEF in the future, in Ethiopia over the next few years. What are your future plans and priorities? Let's talk about that.
Yes. So we are going to a new country program now. And for us, so we are preparing it right now. And this country program will be led by three main assumptions. The first one is that poverty is still UNICEF's biggest threat for the well-being of children. No matter what we say, it is poverty. Conflict as well. So all what we will be doing in UNICEF should be contributing to eradicating poverty to a certain extent. We don't have an eradication of poverty program, but we need to think about it in the same time. And also what else UNICEF can do to lower tensions within societies. Now for that, we feel that our programs will still be looking at the same areas. So the areas will not change. Health will be one of our priority. Education will be one of our priority. Child protections will be one of our priority. Nutrition will be one of our priority. Water and sanitations. These are the core programs which has been in UNICEF for a long time. Yes. But we want to implement those programs in a way that they also contribute to eradicating poverty. Local solutions, because local solutions does contribute to eradicating poverty at the same time, and create much more resilience and sustainability within the country in itself. So that's an element. Employment creation, again, so local solution, where these things are a little bit interlinked, but we are pushing our teams to think a little bit much more innovatively, so that it's not just the transactions if somebody is hungry and we give him food. No. We give him food, but we also make sure that next year he has food. So that's the way how we should be looking in terms of our program. So these will be so we have our 4 traditional, which will be supported by social behavior change, so SBC, but also social policies, so policies in place which allows us to do the other elements. So this is where we are looking at, when it comes to local solutions, productions of food which will be addressing malnutrition within the country, but also which will be enabling communities themselves to produce them without necessarily that external actors will have to tell them what to do, because these are just food elements. We're looking at school feedings, which also should be stimulating agriculture. So when you do school feedings, it is paid, which is somehow subsidized, it will push the agriculture sector to also produce so that it can go back to the schools as well. So you do your programs, but at the same time it should be stimulating and giving and creating a local economy on its own to self-sustain them, but then also to eradicate poverty at the same time. So there needs to be somehow we're looking of ways of supporting the government in terms of innovative activities. So whatever we have talked about in terms of sports and education, same thing again, which needs to be done. Local manufacturing of pharmaceuticals, for example. We are still importing, 80% of medicines coming from outside. It's a huge amount of money which goes back externally, while some of those products, they are very simple to do, and I think there is sufficient intellectual capacity, manufacturing capacity to do that. I always say, and I said it to many of my friends within government here, there is no reason that we have a world-class airline in this country which is well managed, and then we are importing medicines from us. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. So if we can do it in aviation, we can do it in agriculture, we can do this in pharmaceuticals. So, and I think we need to think about partners who will be supporting us or will be supporting the countries. Or basically. So I know that you're not getting necessarily the answer which you want to have, but for us, we have our traditional programs which are not going away because the issues are still there, and these priorities need to be fixed, but they need to be fixed in a way that it contributes to the local economy, that we are creating value of local commodities, that we're reducing poverty here as well and creating a much more harmonious society, where exchange and interactions can be done. And it's easier to do when the wealthier the society becomes. When you're poor, you're fighting more just because of the limited resources. So you need to create internal wealth, which is extremely important.
How does UNICEF adapt its strategies in response to evolving and new challenges?
Yeah. But this is what I said. I mean, if you look at UNICEF 50 years ago, it was all about immunization.
But the world is dynamic right now.
Yes.
Things are, evolving unexpectedly.
But so have we.
Yeah, that's
so,
what
so,
I
so I
mean.
agree. So
What makes it different from other institutions?
because we are evolving, we see the difference. So as I said, beginning, I mean, a very good example is how do we get sports? How do we make sports as an industry to contribute? This is not something. I can give you a very different example, but not from Ethiopia. For example, when I was in Côte d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast, as the representative there, we did something which UNICEF normally does not do at all. But which we feel, or we felt at the time, it's important for children. So we established a factory who transformed plastic waste into construction materials. And we utilized those construction materials to build classrooms. Now, from a context here, this is something that normally an environment agency should be doing, not UNICEF. But we said that the plastic waste today in Côte d'Ivoire is clogging the drainage systems of Abidjan city. We were focused mainly on Abidjan city. And when it clogs the drainage system, it creates underground water pots, which breed in mosquitoes. And when you have mosquitoes, the first category of the society who's affected is children. So for us, how can we remove this plastic waste from society? Now, when you collect plastic and you don't know what to do with the plastic, you store it somewhere and it ends up again in nature. You have cows eating it, which gets another dimension. So we decided this becomes now a UNICEF problem because there's an indirect link directly to it. So we then said, it's something which we not normally do. We said, okay, let's find a solution for those plastics. We didn't have the solutions, but someone else had the solutions, which we have discovered. So we started working with a specific particular company. And the company was actually quite very interesting for us because they transformed plastic into bricks, which you can, and you don't utilize cement anymore because the bricks you can build just like Lego. Very nice buildings. So we said we want it, but it needs to be done. So UNICEF financed completely the constructions of a factory in Côte d'Ivoire. Wow. Now, with this product, so say, okay, let's close the loop because we have now collected the plastic, we have transformed the plastic, and now we utilize this plastic to build classrooms because there was a deficiency of classrooms. So as you can see, it's something which is different. So we have created now a program which is climate change resilient, which contributes to a new way of doing in the construction industry, which is completely new. Which removes waste, plastic waste from the society, and which creates income generating activities for a lot of people who are picking up the plastic from it, because they're the lowest paid, which is moving out people out of poverty, helps in terms of the education system, helps in terms of climate change. It's different. So UNICEF does evolve. Because if we keep doing the things as we have been doing them for 50 years, we will not be moving. So the UNICEF does have the ability. Now, it needs a bit of courage because we have very strict guidelines and also, what can I say, everybody has a mandate. And you need to make sure that you don't cross paths with other agencies' mandates in a certain way. But if there is a benefit for a child, and it's a good thing to do, and it empowers women, why should we not be doing it? And we're trying to find the same way now with the sports industry. That's why we're getting more involved in that. Because we need more institutions so that people think much more positively and much more optimistically than putting, in particular children into a context but where the only thing which they can aspire to is to conflict, dark thinking, and so on and so forth, because we don't need this in this world. We need more positive thinking, more progressive thinking, and I think as UNICEF we aspire to provide these opportunities, and this is where we need to think much more differently. The world has changed. How do we utilize information technology more, making our life easier in a certain way? Why is it that still in 2024 people have to walk 5 kilometers to fetch water, while we have all the capacities of bringing water wherever it is? We can pipe water for 100 kilometers. We can use solar energy, in a much more efficiently in a certain way. How do we transform our education system so that the education system is not just focused on traditional jobs, but they also look at other jobs which could be well paid, for example. There's no reasons why medicine is a formal job, a doctor or health workers are in the formal sector, and while a gardener is in an informal sector. There's no reasons for that. Why an electrician or a plumber is in the informal sector, while it could be a formal sector. So this is where also we need to think, and we need to start thinking better, because the well-being of a child is not just determined for me of treating him in a hospital. That's not the well-being of the child. He needs to be treated at a hospital, but he needs to be loved, he needs to be cared, and opportunities needs to be given to him. And this cannot be done just by the way how we're doing it, have been doing in the past. There needs to be a much more sophisticated way. The other element where UNICEF needs to adapt is that resources are not as available as first. So we need to become much more creative. How do we generate wealth in a society which has been very much dependent? How do you become independent in this particular society? So we need to think a little bit differently. And there needs to be a certain number of elements which needs to be done by the government in itself and by us as well. And that's where UNICEF also looks very, very critically inwards. Where have we been failing this year? And this is what I'm saying. We think that we are a very successful organization, but I still have 12 million children which are out of school. Something I have not done very well.
Well, viewers, this brings us to our conclusion of the time that we have with His Excellency Dr. Abubakar Campo, UNICEF representative to Ethiopia. So till we meet up with another guest next week, of the same time, in different places. See you then.